Welcome to the Family Law Growth Podcast. We interview the nation's fastest growing family law firms to get insights on what is working today. We leave no stone unturned, from intake to the biggest mistakes they've made while scaling to multi-7 figures and 8 figures. I'm your host, Elliot, co-founder of Empirical 360. Let's dive into the episode. All right, so welcome to the episode here. I am with Bob Tharp of Meriwether Tharp. He is a massive player in the Atlanta market. So we're really excited and lucky to get to interview him. So Bob, thank you for being on the show. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I can't wait to dive in because I know you have some advanced stuff to teach the audience here. So first question is, what does the firm, look like as far as give us an introduction to you and the firm, revenue, headcount, whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Okay. I'm Bob Tharp. We created Meriwether Tharp back in 1998. So we've been around a couple of years. We are about 10 locations. We're kind of working to go statewide. We've definitely got Atlanta Metro covered, and now we're kind of expanding beyond the Atlanta Metro area. We've been Inc. 5000 company 5 years in a row over the years. And, we've also been over 8 figures, 6-7 years in a row, something like that. Firm. So we've got staying power, continuing to build a solid foundation.
Nice. So 8 figures. What is like the attorney count look like at the firm?
It varies from time to time, but typically we run between 30 and 45 attorneys given on any given time.
Any given day. That's awesome. So I know you guys have been around for a long time, right? I think it's 26 years maybe or something like that. So what was, other than referrals, what was your first main consistent lead source that you guys were able to establish?
That's a great question. Truthfully, we struggled, if I'm being more honest about it, for probably a good 10 years. Getting going, we were like, I think, so many firms that just, didn't know what to do. We'd spend money on a yellow book, dating myself here, yellow book ad, and, it sort of worked, sort of didn't work. And you just try to do some stuff, but really didn't have the money to do the marketing or anything like that. We're just trying to stay alive. And then we decided to kind of work on focusing on specializing in family law. Got to know our niche, got to know our area better. And I think that really helped us, move forward. And then we started building just straight web content. So we're a classic content-based firm, SEO oriented, to get our foundation going and really just kind of put our name out there.
Nice. So SEO was one of your big first wins. What do you guys do, though? I'm sure you guys get a lot of referrals. Do you do anything intentionally to boost that referral pipeline? What specifically does that look like for you guys?
I mean, we probably could always do more. The key is, name awareness. So back in the day, we'd send calendars out at the beginning of the year and did, traditional classical marketing mailing pieces and stuff like that. I remember putting, stamps on them and sending them out every year and stuff like that. You got to be that same way today. So how do you modernize that? We do it through a lot of Facebook interactions. We do it through social media, hitting our previous clients on social media that we've acquired over the years. And then we do a lot of drip campaigns, so emails that get sent out to follow up with clients on different stages. For example, in Georgia for divorce, you can modify stuff after 2 years. So we often have an email that sort of goes out, around 2 years that says, hey, just want to check in with you, see how things are going. And of course, we try to do stuff along the way that's just a lot of give approach, where we're just giving information, advice, things they should be thinking about, from, how to help them get, update Social Security numbers if that's relevant after the divorce. So we stay front of mind, even though they're not a client, they keep remembering us through that process.
Nice. And so do you guys do that? And do you get a lot of modifications in return, or things like during the holidays, like modifying parenting plans? Is that, not only is that referral, I guess, generation, but do you monetize existing clients that way? Is that a big piece of the business or not really?
I don't know about big piece, but it's definitely a piece of the business. It's a nice layer. You've already spent a lot of money trying to acquire a client. So if you can, the big joke is divorce, you don't have a lifetime client, right? Hopefully they only go through it once. And the reality is hopefully that's true, but they also have other needs that you do fulfill. Modifications, apply for, child support, contempts when people aren't paying, different obligations. So there are ongoing things that they can come back to you for. And that should be pretty easy. If you did a good job the first time and took care of them, there should be easy referrals coming back at you. That's the easy part of doing your branding and building.
Nice. And so main tactic kind of then for like audience takeaway would be at the very least, email drip campaign strategically timed out. Do you guys do any other type of outreach, or is it emails like kind of your bread and butter?
Email is my bread and butter. We also do social too. So ex-clients will put them into a social feed. We're doing Facebook pixels and stuff like that to
Okay.
kind of further develop that.
Nice. So heavy remarketing, all that good stuff.
Right.
Love it. Love it. Those are some good little hacks there. And so as far as like your reputation, your brand, obviously you guys have been around for a long time. How much do you throw that around? How much does that help you get the right types of clients? And then on the flip side, what would you tell a firm that has not been around for that long? How can they compete against somebody like you?
The glass is always half empty, half full. If you're bigger, you talk about the advantages of size. If you're smaller, you talk about personalization and one-on-one, attention. Every place has a pro and a con. I mean, if you're an attorney and you're listening to this and you're like, hey, what do I do? I say the same thing you do on a case. You got a client and this is your position and how do you want to best present it? So, if you're a smaller firm, do the personal angle. Try to do that one-on-one attention. Talk about availability and how you're just a number at a big firm. We're going to, be straightforward. We're going to talk about the advantage of our size, how we always have someone to cover, access to resources, what we can do with all that extra ability.
Nice, nice. And how do you, because you have an interesting set of, I guess, service offerings. How has that like helped a brand? Because you don't just cater to one type of person necessarily. Like, tell me about your go-to-market strategy. Like, what did you think through when you set that up, and how has that helped you guys grow?
I mean, one of the core values behind the scenes over here is trying to improve access to justice for as many people as possible. When I look at family law, one of the things that kind of always bothered me about the industry is a lot of people just can't afford an attorney. If you look at people and you say, my ideal client must have over $150,000 of income to even be a good client, well, that means there's vast majority of America that's not being serviced. And I think we can do better. And if we don't do better, I'm afraid what other ways the regulations are going to change, they're going to open up other people to fill that gap, because that gap needs to be filled. There are people that need help at all income levels. And so we try to give a variety of products that help people where they are. Obviously, you can't give away as many hours on hands, on a lower income case as you can on some that have higher, resources. But you can develop great products for each little bracket that helps people along their path and get them, to a better tomorrow.
And when you started, did you start with like a mid-level, higher end? What did that like? How did that evolution look for you guys? Was it as you were kind of limiting out on your TAM, you had to go into other segments, or was it from the very start like we want to try and service everybody as best as we possibly can?
We probably started high, mid to high range, and then sort of expanded from that. But it was always in the background. I remember, people that couldn't afford us in the very beginning, and I felt, horrible. Here's someone that really needs help in a bad situation, and I know what they need to be doing to get them there, but they can't afford my time, right? I think so that really hit us early of our approach and said, we can do better. As even if you can't afford to do a lot of them, if you're a family law attorney, you're listening to this, if you can do a few, and we all did a few, we can really help some people out there. And so one of the things, we really want to do is go out there and try to reach that audience. I think there's way too many people in our field that are targeting high asset only divorces. I think there's a lot larger population that's not in that bracket that needs help and can afford to pay. They may not be able to pay, crazy $100,000 on this case, but they can afford, and you can provide help that's appropriate and try to move them to a better spot. You can't do, certain things that you do for the other client, but I think just like everything else in life, you can't always afford everything you want to buy. But you can at least afford good products to get you there. A car still gets you to work, right? A bike can get you to work. It doesn't. You don't have to have a Porsche to get to work. So we got to think of what is the best, approach to get you to where you want to be.
I love that. And I actually, it's funny you say that, right? Because I've told, clients before, if we're targeting, that person that makes over 200 grand, that's maybe a couple percentage of the population. And then and so it's very hard to target those people. And so, as a growth strategy, targeting the bigger segments of the population makes a ton of sense, obviously. And then there's obviously, you cast a wider net, you get more people. So as far as like your mindset around growth, when you first started to now, how did you make the transition from like lawyer to now business person? And like, what advice do you have for people trying to make that transition or that don't believe that it's even possible?
When you think back 27 years doing this, I think there's two pivot points that were the toughest and biggest and most impactful moments. First is specialization in family law. And the second, is just dead on. Moving away from being just, running cases here to running the practice. It was tough. I struggled with it a lot more than, I talk about most of the time. I love cases. I love going to court. I love the litigation. I love devos. I love mediations. I love the whole process. And it's easy to get into that. But when I'm doing that process, I'm doing those cases, I can only impact one or handful of people at a time. By working at the firm and working with all my attorneys, I have the ability to do 1,000 clients in a month and help 1,000 people. That's just a totally different impact than helping. There's no way I could do 1,000 clients. So you got to think about where you're going to leverage your time. Can I leverage it? And do you really have to be on every little piece, or can you get other people to handle parts and then you can play the pieces you want to play? But the key one, though, is running your business. One of the biggest struggles people have is they don't think of it as a business to start with. And if they do think of it as a business, they just don't give it the time to build the business. And that's what's critical. You got to give it the time. You got to put in the effort. You got to learn. They don't teach it in law school. Yeah. They just don't. It's, something I changed about the curriculum, but people come out of law school and don't know how to run a business. And you have to learn it. And you can learn it hard knocks accidentally, but you can be very intentional about it. Work with great partners. They can help coach you up through different pieces. I know I went to one of y'all's events and we were doing, the intake department. We were talking about, how to handle calls coming in. And I learned some great things. I've been doing this for, 20 years. I have an intake department with a ton of people working in it. And I still came out of that going, never thought of that. And it wasn't just what you said, but it was what you inspired at that meeting. So I came out of that going, I probably spent the next 2 or 3 days. I don't think I ever told you this. Unfortunately, I'm going on a cruise. I'm spending the next 2 or 3 days, every moment I can, writing down notes because my brain's still not shut off of ideas I'm required coming out of that. Because I didn't want to forget it, during my vacation time. So I'd have it when I got back. So
don't you hate that on vacation? You can't turn the old brain off. It hurts.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
So tactically, how did you did you lawyer for 40 hours a week and then, 20 hours you work on the business? Like, how did that transition look for you? I mean, I know it's probably a while ago now, but how could you give people that really tactical advice of you need to work on the business? How do you tactically do it?
I think first you got to identify your biggest problem, right? Is your biggest problem, you have plenty of, you don't have enough clients, you need to work on your marketing. How do you get clients? The biggest problem is you got enough people calling, but you don't have enough people to talk to them and you can't, close them. Well, that's a problem. I always think it's, what is that obstacle that you're facing at the moment? Identify it, try to clear that obstacle, and then figure out what the next one's going to be. There's going to be times when your biggest problem is getting more clients. There's times when it's converting those leads. There's times when, frankly, it's having enough attorneys to do, what needs to be done at the appropriate level, at the quality you expect, to deliver the services you want. So I think it's a little bit at what matters at the time. But I think it starts with just being conscious about it. And what did I do? A lot of it, to be truthful, a lot of it was late at night. A lot of it was after I did a whole day, maybe tried a case, and then I went back to work. A lot of it was the weekends because I couldn't afford to really give up that 40-hour billable and everything during the week. So I had to do it on extra time. You make those sacrifices. Your family makes those sacrifices, trying to help you through that process so you can grow out of it.
Yeah. So it's not, and it's funny because if you look at a firm like yours today, it's like, oh, well, yeah, they've been around forever. Of course it's easy for them, but it wasn't easy, right? That's what I think a lot of people miss. So what was one of the like best investments or hires you made, or even both, that have really helped you, grow? Was it like coaching? Was it a key hire? What does that look like for you?
I mean, there's a lot of great ones I can kind of point to. This was great, and a lot of great people who work here in different roles. There's some, moments that still stick out. I think being intentional about creating an intake department was one of them. Um, we used to, paralegal would try, is that word, to take the intake call if they were available. Receptionist goes, "Hey, anyone available?" And paralegal, maybe someone will say yes, maybe no. They take the call. They did a really good job, and they try to, pass the call to one of our attorneys to try to process the intake. And, then they were like, "Where's the attorneys? They're all in court. What am I going to do?" And, just chaos. And we said, we can't have that and build a business. So we, we're very intentional about starting off with just an intake coordinator, one intake coordinator, not paralegals, and said, paralegals, go back to being a paralegal. We've got one that's going to try to process the vast majority. Two, one of y'all can be backup. Start there, and then start building from there as you need to, based upon, the demands that your volumes are coming at you.
So intake coordinator was a game changer. Any other, like, let's say somebody's stuck at 2 million, maybe 1 million, 3 million. Like, what do you think are some key things that they can do to maybe break out of that if they're looking for next level stuff?
A lot of it, especially the 2 and 3 million barrier, to me is a lot about a risk taking. There's a couple of spots that are just, you do have to risk a little bit, right? You're going to have to hire when you don't know if you have enough cases, and you're going to build it and hope that they will come, right? And there's just risk, and I see a lot of firms struggle with going for it and just reaching out and making that move. It's scary. I mean, you're like, how do I have enough to feed them? How am I going to pay the salary with, I don't have anyone call. And if you ever stop, even us today, if I go, wow, how am I going to feed people next month? And I ignore that I got people that I know. I ignore that we have calls coming in. I forget that we have everything built. You get scared. But I think one of the keys is you've got to take those risks. And you also really got to build your systems. Every step along the way, you should be building a system. It may not be the best, but build the best you can for that day, and then come back and upgrade it. It's that constant evolution of rebuilding and rebuilding and rebuilding and getting a little bit better. I'm still going to conferences out there to keep learning. I still like to go, what are other ideas out there? If there's something that possibly could benefit us in some way, I might, get one or two things out of it. But if that helps us move forward, every little piece, this is not I think people are looking for the magical lottery ticket.
Yeah.
I don't think that's how a successful business is built. It's built, especially in family law. You're not going to get a lottery case, right? This isn't PI where you can get a home run in big, revenue come in.
Yeah.
You've got to build step by step, stone by stone. And it takes time, it takes patience, and it takes determination. But as you're doing it, be really, really focused on building the system for people in the future to use. So it's not just today's intake coordinator, but that is a role that you need to have other people trained up on. So what does that role need to do? What does every role in your office need to do? What's the receptionist need to do? All the way to your top attorneys. What's the expectation of one of your attorneys training other attorneys? And what does that look like? How do you mentor? So building every little piece of the system. We find it helpful to use software for that. So, different choices out there in the market where you can put that kind of information, but the key is accessibility.
Nice. It's funny. I love that. It's not the lottery, but a quote I like is, it's 100 golden BBs, not a silver bullet. Yeah. It's unfortunately 100 golden BBs, right? So what is something that
inches,
Oh, go ahead.
It's the game of inches. It's, yes, I built a website page that added 5, views for the year. It sounds like meaningless, but if one of those 5 converts, and I get that once a year, and over 20, plus years, that starts to add up a lot for work you did 20 years ago and you forgot about. You do enough of that out there, and you've got enough seeds. I mean, we got thousands of pages of info. We get calls from pages I forgot we wrote.
I know you guys have such a crazy site. It's so funny. So yeah, that's definitely some long-term thinking right there. I love that. What is something that you would wish you had done like way sooner? Like, man, if I was starting back at that point, I would have done this way earlier. What do you think was a move like that?
Leadership training, no hesitation.
Really?
Um, as you go up, as you get bigger, it can't be just you. It's got to be you and your team. If it's just you, the firm will bottleneck at you. And so you got to train other people that can, do great in spots where you can't be everywhere. So, you have the opportunity, you're doing it already, train others at the same time. Even if it's just part-time, even if it's just to show them what's going on, even just to keep them in the loop. But start to train them how to be leaders. There's the other miss from law school is no one trains leadership. How do you work with a paralegal? How do you work with any staff, right? We just assume you know how to do it. And the question I have is for someone that's gone through high school, college, and law school, where did they train you at? And they don't. And we see the marketing and the business side that's not being trained, but it's also an internal leadership development and how we work with others. I think that's almost as important as the rest of it.
So leadership training for your staff and yourself, or mainly staff, you
Everyone.
think is a yeah.
Actually,
What have been some of the better programs that you've seen out there?
um, I think they all have pros and cons. I don't know that I have a favorite program. I think it's getting out there with the material. There's enough books out there to learn just about everything. There are so many great books on business leadership, how to run a team, dysfunctions of a team. You just kind of go around and around. That section of the bookstore that no one looks at with all the business books.
Yeah.
Go back there and start pulling some out, and read one at a time. I'm an avid reader. I moved to audio over books most of the time, but I usually have one of both going at all time, and constantly reading something. I think I came out of your conference and read 3 books on sales that week. It's like, all right, I want to go deeper in this subject area. Let me see. You inspired me to kind of move forward and learn more. And I think that's, if you keep that attitude, whether
Yeah.
it's sales, whether it's marketing, whether it's how to run operations, whether it's leadership, you will start to grow your practice because you just get better having read so many books about it and different functions and thoughts of how to do it.
Interesting. What would you say is one of the hardest things about leadership that you either experience now or have experienced throughout? Like what's one of the hardest things?
Um, it's tough to make tough decisions. It's easy to make easy decisions. It's easy when things are winning. It's easy when things are going great. It's tough to make tough decisions. It's tough to have accountability, hold someone accountable. It's tough to have the, conversations that people need. But if you don't, there's also consequences. And if you don't address it, there's problems. And so I think, it's really critical to learn how to have those conversations, doing in a good format. You don't lead with a stick. Maybe that works in war. I'll leave that to the military guys. But when you're running a business that you're looking for longevity, you got to build a team around certain values, propositions, and core beliefs, which all are trying to accomplish, and get people on board with what you're trying to do. And hopefully you find the right people to help you move forward.
Love it. I'm learning stuff here. Here we go. I love this stuff. So let's go into it. Let's talk a little bit about your sales process. I'm going to skip some questions here because you just have like such a rockin' sales process. Can you talk through like what is a lead when a lead enters your system? What happens at that point? Like, what does that client journey look like before they become a client of the firm?
Yeah, it starts before they ever call you. Really pause on that. Your online presence. Maybe that wasn't true when I started. We didn't have online presence, but today it does, right? They're likely to visit your website before they call you, almost guaranteed. They're likely to visit your Google My Business page before they call you, or Google Business Profiles. I'll keep up to date with their words. So I think it starts there. You're starting the relationship before they call. And think about what impression. I think there's a tendency to say, hey, third party do it. Well, that's nothing wrong with that. They bring the technical expertise to help you out. But you still have your voice. You still have what you want to say. You still have what your message is. You want to make sure that's reflected in the material that you're presenting. And then once the lead enters your system, it's a customer service game. That's not, we could pretend, oh, it's easy. They're going to hire us, or whatever law school taught you. Like, oh, they're just coming. No, it's a family law. It's a competitive marketplace, and there's a lot of people, a lot of choices for people to choose from, and we need to teach a little bit better the respect we should be giving our customers. I know, old school thought process, keeping this distance of, we're attorneys and we're all this professional and this whole different thing. And of course, you should be professional, but it's also important to be relatable. It's important to listen. It's important to be active. It's important to be there. Answer the call first time, quickly. Give them the information they need quickly. Help them out, not looking just to close, but just help people. If you give them the information to get them to the next spot, it's not going to kill you. Everyone's like, oh, we got to charge for a consult. We don't charge for consults. Never have. I don't see the point of it. We're here to help, and if we can help, great. And that karma kind of works back in your favor, and they'll refer others, or they'll come back to you if they really need more advanced help. I do think it works out pretty well.
You're speaking my language. You're saying all the right stuff that I love hearing. So it's funny because for anyone that watches, I am very, very against paid consults. There's lots of videos that I've talked about it. So can you tell me a little bit about infrastructure? Of course, whatever you're comfortable sharing, right? But a call comes in, it goes to an intake person, and then what does the sales process look like? Is it a non-attorney salesperson? Is it an attorney? Like, what does that process look like for you?
I'll give you a little look behind the scenes. Way we do it is we have intake coordinators that are doing a conflict check. So check the fundamentals. You don't want to really let the call go any further than that. We do have a high volume of calls, so we do a high volume of conflicts that pop up. So it'll happen to you even when you're small. Don't let it slip up. Always make sure that's the first thing that they're trained on, first thing they do. And if they do nothing else well on that call, at least get that. And then build them up from there. And build some rapport, get some basic information, make sure you can service what their needs are. They can do some things like vetting, sales calls, junk calls, all that stuff that's coming in. But when you get a customer, for us, do both, someone live in Georgia, we get calls that, with our marketing, both parties are out of state. You're like, we don't cover Illinois, whatever the random state they're calling from. So we can't actually help you. You need to get someone out there to help you. So we do some vetting there. And there's, everyone can debate what level of vetting you should do. We do our, approach. And then if they, go further, we put them directly with our attorney. So I know some people with non-attorney sales, we've always held to going to attorney, and, it seems to be working for us really well. And we try to get them there fast as possible. I like to get them from the coordinator on that call to an attorney whenever possible. We got an attorney available. Why aren't we passing them? I don't believe in scheduling. You take a no-show risk. Why would you take that? You have them on the phone. And no one wants that frustration of a call back and another meeting and another meeting. If you're just frustrating the consumer.
Yep.
Remove frustrations. If we learn something from Amazon, remove frustrations. It takes too long to get your package. They get it there quickly. I go to Amazon versus someone else to buy. Same concept. Why are we putting barriers here, whether it's cost or time, waiting to get an answer if you are available to help them? So I like to remove as many barriers as possible, and see if they like us, we like them, it's a good fit, and then maybe we can go further.
I love it. So big insights there. You go straight from intake to attorney who is ready. Does the attorney, are they still in casework? Or are they just strictly there for that? Like, what does that look like for you?
Today we do have people that don't do cases that are attorneys, that have been attorneys for years, and this is sort of what they prefer to do, and that's their role. But that was not always the way. So, for the folks that are kind of going through this growth stage, I'll show you how we did it. We started with just a handful, not all, a handful of attorneys that did it as a secondary role to doing cases, and, worked out deals like, oh, I got court on Monday. Can you cover me, Elliot? And, make sure we had our coverage set, but make sure someone's available for the calls of the day. So someone was always there, and, take a simple thing. You got 5 people that in a 5-person firm, everyone take a day. And if you can't make your day because you have court, swap it with someone else. If you got 3 people, you may have to take 2 days. But get your coverage there. Start from that type of format, and and work it up. Once you get to a critical mass and you got enough extra and you got enough cash flow to put someone full time, you'll know when it's time. And the other thing is, not all attorneys are good at it. Some are better than others, and you do want to put the right person in the right space. So the people who are better at closing naturally should be in that role over people that are struggle with it. And that's nothing wrong. There's plenty of jobs and plenty of work needed to be done in a law firm. Just try to get your people in the right spot. So it doesn't have to be if you got all 30 people doing it. Why would you do that? Get 5 and get them really good at it, and leave the other 25 to do something else.
I love that. And so how do you, let's say for the smaller firm, if they have an attorney, a couple of attorneys closing, how would you measure that? Like, and how would you make sure that somebody is not either like cherry picking cases for themselves, if they're closing for themselves, or do they get assigned to a different attorney? How would you think through that process?
First, track. So I'm a data junkie, and maybe that makes life a little bit easier. You really need to build a tracking system of some sort. There's a lot of different options. I'm sure y'all can coach different people through different things. We use Salesforce. It works for us, but we custom built the thing from scratch, and really because I wanted and demanded a certain flow and control. But the simple thing is start tracking and seeing how they're doing. I think when someone's cherry picking, and you can kind of identify, oh, well, they're mainly doing better because they're doing the referrals. Of course, they're closing higher than someone that's taking the cold calls, if you will, coming in, that don't know the firm and they're just looking to check us out because I saw a Yellow Page ad in my old days, right? You can kind of check it out the same way. You're not going to close Google, LSAs, whatever, PPC, organics, or just any marketing source as well as you will a referral. You should know that going in. And those are two different buckets. And you need to look at how do you close in a bucket that doesn't include your just referrals that should, if you did a good job with other clients, close at a higher rate naturally.
Nice. So just really track it, obviously. Yeah, tracking.
Look at the data, and then keep reviewing it.
I love it. And so would you say, like, how does your post console follow-up look? Do you guys do text? Do you guys do emails? Do you find some things work better than others? What does like the follow-up process look like?
We definitely do follow-up calls depending upon the call and how it ended and what the process would look like for that particular case. Some people say, hey, not ready yet, can you call me back in a couple months? So you kind of honor that. We do emails. Follow-ups. We do ask, is it okay to send something to the email during the call? So they get that authority during the call, and then we do email campaigns to them after the fact. We don't do text. We've learned the hard way. You don't want to text and have their spouse discover that they called you today from seeing the phone laying around or something like that. Different approaches. I know some people do, but we personally try to avoid that.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a risky situation. I mean, it is. I always tell people a text has 100% open rate if it's a legit number, but at the same time, you also might really piss somebody off, so it's a little risky. So that's a tough one. But if you guys are doing well with emails, so that's good to know, right, for the audience. If you don't have an email strategy, because you already mentioned that earlier of like nurturing your existing people, and so email is definitely something that you're doing well. And so, what would you say, because I know a lot of people have a hard time with this, what has been one of your most successful ways of recruiting either sales staff or I guess first let's talk about the sales staff role. Like, how do you recruit an intake person? What do you look for in that person?
Empathy is probably number one. I think you can train a lot of things. You can't train empathy as well. And I'm sure you can improve it, but it's just easier if you can find someone that it's just someone you enjoy talking to. That's nice. That has a good phone voice, because frankly, a lot of times they're by phone. If you're doing them in person, that's a different thing, and you may look at different characteristics. But I think it starts there. You want someone that's detailed. That's going to actually do your tracking. That's a requirement with us, that you're putting in your information and everyone's able to see everything on the tracking side of it. You can train that up to a degree, but if someone hates computers, it may not be in your computer-based system. That may not be the best fit. So it's not made for everybody.
That is a great answer. I never even thought about empathy because after a while, what I see, because I listen to so many calls, is like they get irritated at the clients. Like, why are you calling me? It's like their worst day. Give them a break, right? And so I guess how would you? So would you do an interview over the phone to see if they have a good phone voice and they're good on the phone? Then what would you? How would you screen for empathy? Like, what would you be your thought process there?
I prefer to do the interview on the, classic Zoom, Teams, whatever it is format. If I'm not doing in person, that's a factor. One of the things I do love about the in-person interview still is how they interact with your, front staff before you come to pick them up. Little trick with us on interviewing, we intentionally leave you in the lobby for a few minutes to see how you interact with a receptionist. And when I come to pick up interviewee and bring them back to my office to chat, as we walk them out first, our receptionist gives me a thumbs up or a thumbs down based upon how they were acting in the lobby. So at the very beginning, if they don't work well with the front staff, they're probably not going to be the person you want. It's a good early indicator.
Interesting. That's more of a selfish question for me. So what about attorneys? How do you like? There's a serious. I mean, you have a lot of them, right? So you're obviously good at it. A lot of people have a hard time finding attorneys, and you have attorneys that can actually do sales as well. So how do you find attorneys these days? It seems to be a real struggle.
I mean, it's a much more competitive market finding attorneys today than it was 10 years ago. It's just night and day difference. I recognize the pain. I recognize the challenge, and we're challenged just like everyone else. We do try to develop talent directly out of law school, invest in the future so we can train up our systems from day one. I think that is beneficial. You can't do it all with that, but it's a good foundational layer. And think of it as a minor league development program to a baseball major league team. And I think you always want to have some good prospects in the minors that you're developing up to be future great attorneys. As far as other folks, I think what we approach it as, I'd encourage you all to sit down and think about is, why should someone work for you? We're like, well, because I'll pay them. Nah, that's not a good pitch. If that's your entire pitch, you'll get some people with a high enough number, but that's probably not the person you want and not really going to be a successful program. Just like you would think about marketing to clients, you need to think about marketing to attorneys and recruits, and why should they join you? What is special about being at your operation versus somewhere else? We're very intentional about what we're about. We're very clear about what we're looking for, and frankly, what we're not. And we're a match for some, and frankly, we're not for others. And that's okay. But I think it does start with that. If you get known for being this type of firm, doing this type of situation, you tend to get brings like. And so they know people that are like them, and they bring others. And so that is help for internal recruiting. But also go to bar events if you just kind of want the fundamentals. Talk to opposing counsel that you work with, people that you like working with in cases. That's actually how our firm started. Lee and I started working with some cases together. Lee Meriwether, and next thing you know, Meriwether Tharp formed. So
That's awesome.
it probably started way back then, and we could just keep to that attitude. You know who you like as opposing counsel, and frankly, you know who you don't like working with. Try to work with people you enjoy working with. It makes a big difference.
So you just do the, networking. Obviously, I think, I guess not enough people say that is, why would someone want to work with you? I guess that's a good question. Do you do you spend money on ads, or is it just like a lot of networking, and you kind of have this network effect that you've already had because you kind of been in the game for a while?
We get some of the network effect. We do, some of the just, classic, people, but we also go out there and Indeed. We're also out there, doing classic, recruiting type of situations. We don't use recruiters, generally speaking. So, different approaches on that. I feel like the information's out there. There's people looking. You just need to be out there to be found, saying you're looking. And then you also need to give them the reason why they should act. I think that's the big missing piece, is why join my firm? Every firm's different. Every, culture is different in a firm. But everyone should be kind of reflecting, why should someone join here, and how do I help them? We think about hiring, we always think about how they're going to help us. Oh, they're going to bring us more money. They're going to do all this work. Well, it's a two-way street. what are you going to do to help them in terms of whatever it is they want? And a lot of people want a lot of different things. So you need to be, working your active listening skills. You think about what do they want? What can you provide? What options and opportunities do they have that meet their desires? And I think that's the fundamental missing piece a lot of people overlook. It's not so tough when you're clear about what you stand for and the type of people you want, and they either know that's a great place to go work and they want to go work there. It changes the dynamic because you will have people competing, 3 or 4 different firms fighting for the same recruit right nowadays. And I know exactly, what our pitch will be. That I won't share today. But I know what our pitch is on why they should come over here versus somewhere else. And, we'll win some, we'll lose some, but I know we'll be at least making them think. And we'll sometimes lose on the front side and then get a call 6 months later. Went there, made a bad choice. And, sometimes they get a second chance. Sometimes they don't. Depends on the situation.
So it's just like a sales process. It needs to be intentional. There needs to be a pitch. I guess what I want people to understand, and I'm understanding as well, is that you've given it a lot of thought and a lot of effort. It's not like people just come work for you because you pay them anymore. At least for family law, it seems.
Correct. I struggle a little bit when I get out of my territory. I'm looking to bring in someone in marketing, and I'm not familiar with it. I think the worst one I ever did was graphic design. I'm like, know nothing about graphic design, and I'm like, make pretty pictures. That was probably the dumbest looking interview from my side. But I said, this is what I'm looking for. Can you do it? And it's still, it's just someone you want to work with, and found a great hire in that spot. And it's all about, that one, it's tougher. We don't have as much to offer to a graphic designer to help them develop. I don't really, have any piece there. I don't, but they still have what they want. They have work-life balance that they want. You can work with their hours. Can you make a schedule that they like? Can you, find good ways to work together? Don't lock into work in your way, because if you do, then you're not going to be able to work in their way. So meet them where they are, rather than demanding they meet you where you are. I think it's kind of an interesting, different approach.
Oh yeah, for sure. Very different. I mean, I like that a lot, honestly, especially because I would say as firms solve their acquisition, which it's hard to believe maybe if you're stuck in it, is one of the easier things. I think the hardest part is finding attorneys right now, at least that's the word on the street. So having this approach is obviously huge, of like, this is a pipeline that you have to tend to, just like marketing, I think is big and differentiator. So my last question for you, Bob, there's so many questions I could ask, honestly, because I know I know a little bit more about Bob, right? He has got some serious cool stuff, but what would you give somebody for advice of, like, they're stuck, whether it's at $1 million, they're at 2 million. Usually 2 to 3 is like where most people can kind of get stuck, because they just are built so much off of referrals. What is that advice that you give them to break out of that? Is like, what's the best thing you could see?
If your firm is exclusively referrals or primarily referrals, it's only as good as you're there, or the people that they're coming to see are there. You're extremely codependent on you. And I don't know that that's actually a business, Elliot. It's a good, job. It's a good, career. It can be very successful. You can have a great time. You can make great impacts. But if you're thinking in terms of wanting to grow past that $1, $2, $3 million barrier, and you're trying to grow a business, you got to think like a business, which means you got to think, how do I acquire clients that I don't know? You can't just run the practice exclusively off of referrals. You would be, we'd probably be, third, or if not even worse, our size, if they were looking at that situation. And you're certainly not going to grow fast just running off referrals. You got to learn some marketing approaches and techniques, and figure out what works for you, from the messaging all the way down to how you approach marketing. Some things work, some don't. Yellow Book doesn't work anymore. You got to know when it doesn't work, right? I actually saw that in real life. It always impacted my life, of watching the Yellow Book be extremely effective and then watching it have zero impact. It was it's crazy. It sounds so silly today as we look back at it, but that was marketing and legal. And so when it died, the world fractured. And then people said, okay, what else do we do? And how else do we go down the path? But you really, if you got to have a kind of a marketing machine, a sales process that is bringing in people beyond you. That's what real business is a business that comes not because of Bob, but because of your company, and what your company stands for, and your brand and what you're trying to build. Totally different game, and nothing wrong with the other game, but that other game, a referral, will never become a major business. I mean, could you imagine Amazon living off of referrals? Coca-Cola, any of them? There's just super small companies throughout this world in other areas, but the ones that are big, the ones that are getting market share, they're marketing, and they're getting known, and they're getting known at broader groups, and there's a lot of beauty in it. I know people are very comfortable. It's easy to be comfortable in your referral base. Frankly, it's highly profitable because you're not paying marketing costs, so you're not worried about cost per acquisition. None of that really is a factor, but you're also not building a system that's safer and deeper, and more stable. The bigger you are, the more stability there is. Even back in day one with me and Lee, I had my own practice. Lee had his own practice. You have a bad month and you're a solo. It was a bad month, right? You're struggling everywhere in life because of that. The two of us together, maybe he had a good month and I had a bad month, and we could blend the two, right? And so you evened it out. And the bigger you get, the more even it gets. And that's critical. The larger your client base is, the more sources you have them coming from. If Yellow Book goes away, not a big deal. I got plenty of other sources, and so you always want to kind of make sure you have a good diversification. I think it goes back to I don't think many financial folks would come out there and say put all your money in one stock. Hopefully not. But you want to have a diverse portfolio of clients, attorneys. And people do move on. I think as an attorney, it really hurts as a leader when someone leaves your firm. I know that's one thing that I struggle with over the years, right? It feels very personal the first, time it happens, like, oh, they hate me, leaving, and maybe they didn't like working there. It's possible. Everyone's not meant to be with everyone. But frankly, it's a lot bigger than that. Sometimes they needed more money. Sometimes they needed a different, place to live. Sometimes they just didn't like your practice area. There's a lot broader reasons than you in that process, but transition is going to happen. You know that. And if you can own that, you got to start going, well, do you really want to have transition where you're at 3 attorneys and 1 leaves? You lost a third of your labor force, and what impact does that have versus 10 and you lose 1? You've only lost 10% of your labor force. And of course, the bigger you get, the smaller of an impact it is. And those ripples are just small little ripples. They're not major waves that disrupt the whole operations and risk the company going under. It does help to be bigger for that stability, and frankly makes a lot of life safer, and growth easier, because now you got a solid foundation to build from. Can't do that on referral.
That is very well said. I'm a huge, that's like the message I like to say, but that's really well said. I didn't think about it from 1 attorney leaving to 3, and I've seen it happen. I haven't heard it articulated like that, where that can really stunt a firm for a long time and maybe not even recover if 1 leaves. When it's just 2 or it's just 3, that always can really, I've seen that go really badly, honestly. So it's interesting to hear that kind of stems from just marketing not being as good as it could be. Makes sense, obviously, but that was well articulated. So if somebody wants to come work for you, Bob, wants to connect with you, what's the best way for them to reach out? Because obviously we want family attorneys listening to this. Yeah,
if you're out there in Georgia or a different state, we're always looking to grow. Don't assume because you're in South Carolina, we may not be interested. We're always looking to grow. If you're Georgia, definitely interested. You can go to our website, mtlawoffice.com, go to the careers page, and submit an application. I actually get that email on every one of those that are submitted and review them all personally. Of course, we have a team that also looks at them, but those are the ones that get directly to my email that I'll look at whenever they're coming in, any time of the day they're coming in. So
love it.
Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Bob, for being on. We love it. Treasure trove of knowledge. It's always fun talking to you. And so everyone. Hopefully, you guys want to work with Bob at some point and reach out to him. But thanks for being on the show.
Appreciate you having me. Good luck to y'all.